Do some journalists create more problems than they report, especially regarding issues like illegal immigration? Because every problem has a solution, but misinformation can get in the way. And that misinformation can happen thanks to good people with good intentions, but equally bad ideas. Particularly problems that could be avoided in the first place if people were better informed. Here's an example. The following PBS segment about 3 unaccompanied minors crossing the border from Mexico into the United States.
Jeff, that's right. Just yesterday, in a remote stretch of the Arizona border with Mexico, we met 3 young girls, 3 sisters. Genesis is 14, Nicole is 13, and little Valeria is just 8. Now, these sisters had just made the 1,500-mile journey from Chiapas in southern Mexico, where they called home, up to the U.S. border. Their mother had actually left years ago. She'd come to the States as the sole provider to support her family. The girls had been living with a great-grandmother who could no longer care for them, so they headed north to reunite with their mother. Here, in fact, is what Nicole told us about that trip.
And while the reporter makes it a point to properly enunciate Chiapas, Mexico, she fails to ask an obvious question. Where is their father? Was the mother a widow? Are they all from the same father, by the way? And my preemptive apologies if I'm mistaken about there being more than one father, or if maybe PBS was planning on interviewing the father at some later date. But this is something I've noticed with other stories presented by PBS, and what I would call the bleeding heart angle, which seems to be directed at PBS's target audience, people who also listen to NPR, and people who vote blue no matter who, and people who overall consider themselves to be progressive and on the left side of the political spectrum. But for anyone who claims to care about the plight of immigrants, there are solutions to this massive problem, but it's as if the lowest cost solutions, beginning with just self-responsibility, like not having children you're not ready to raise just yet, no, that's unthinkable to many progressives. Many of them would call that victim blaming. And I'm sure many of these PBS viewers would even say it's racist to call that out. How dare you expect anyone else to take responsibility for their lives when somehow, some way, it's ultimately society's fault? When all else fails, just blame it on society. That always sounds so profound. By the way, I have tremendous respect for many journalists, even the ones I can tell are not informing the public with the full picture. Journalism is a very difficult profession, and real journalists risk their lives to get the facts. And not all journalists are as overpaid and overrated, glorified corporate lackey talking heads such as Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow, who are not technically real journalists, by the way. But they and their media companies that pay them millions of dollars a year definitely know how to sell them as such to the public. And this is why many people are so misinformed about problems that affect all our lives. And they're doubly disinformed on how they can avoid so many problems in the first place, when certain journalists seem to be more preoccupied with heartfelt stories that could win them a Pulitzer Prize more so than informing society about the root causes of problems that continue to repeat themselves on loop. Here's what I mean.
But all of this just underscores how incredibly precarious this journey can be, even when the girls felt they'd reached safety in the United States. Jeff?
So what happens now, Amna, to those 3 young girls and to other unaccompanied minors who are making similar treks?
Well, for these 3 girls, there is now a multi-agency effort that's been triggered. They'll be passed into HHS custody, which has a system to care and house unaccompanied migrant children. They will vet their mother, hopefully reunite them in the coming weeks. We'll continue to follow their story. But the larger question you ask here is exactly right, Jeff. It's how is the U.S. going to continue to provide and care for what we know are a rising number of unaccompanied children who are now coming from further and further afield? It's just one of the many challenges at the border that U.S. authorities now have to deal with. Jeff?
Amna Nawaz, incredible reporting by you and your team there. We will see you back here tomorrow evening.
Thanks, Jeff.
No, what this story actually underscores is why does the Mexican government continue to allow such murderous levels of criminality in their country? Why aren't you reporting more on that root cause? Why is it instead reported as if it's most Americans' fault that they want stronger borders to stop allowing a significant number of criminals into the country? And why is our government doling out so many benefits to illegal immigrants, regardless of their criminal background? Benefits that our government can't seem to afford for many people who can barely afford rent nowadays despite working full-time jobs. This is why journalism seems so utterly useless to people when they actually pay attention to it. Because it's more about sensationalizing tragedies than it is about informing people about the root causes to problems, let alone their solutions, which do exist. But of course, many of those solutions that might involve the mass incarceration of murderous criminals, let alone the death penalty for those who are guilty of multiple murders, including in prison and after they're let out and given a second chance. No, that's just a bridge too far for many journalism graduates and reporters that seem more concerned about accolades from their colleagues for their objective reporting that is mostly biased towards progressivism. Because let's face it, it's a certain personality type that gets into journalism. For the most part, they naturally lean left. And obviously, not all people who get into journalism are lefty progressives. There's more than enough journalists that are conservative, right-wing religious types. And you can usually find them on Fox News, showing off their legs while wearing crucifixes around their necks to remind the viewer that they're both sexy and devoted to Christ. And that's not a judgment call. It's an observation that needs to be pointed out just as much as all these sensationalized horror stories journalists love to tell like a scary story over a campfire. After all, if it bleeds, it leads, namely to higher advertising rates. And that's fine. I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for people making a living from a necessary vocation such as true journalism and reporting stories that affect all our lives. But there is a dangerous disingenuousness to many journalists who, due to their natural progressive or conservative bias, they almost lie by omission. And PBS seems to do this a lot for lefty causes, just as much as Fox News is accused of doing it for right-wingers. I should know because I practically hate watch PBS every morning, and mostly because they're one of the few media outlets that have no commercials on YouTube. Besides, I might as well put some of my tax dollars to use considering it's publicly funded broadcasting. And they do have great reporting too. It's not entirely out of spite that I watch PBS. But when I see segments like these where they miss the mark on the complete story, that's infuriating. Or other segments like these from Frontline a couple of years ago where they interviewed a single mother and her 7 children who had to resort to sleeping in a van at a Walmart parking lot.
Is it scary that it can all fall apart?
That's why we had to go to the shelter.
I met Ciartis Harris in a Walmart parking lot in South Dallas.
Because they were called.
Ciartis has 7 kids and was living in a shelter. But before that, she says they often lived here in her van. You slept in here with 7 kids for a couple of months?
It wasn't like all the time with all of them, but yeah, at some point in time we was, like in between like trying to find a motel or other people's houses to sleep in. If it wasn't like panning out, we would, go find somewhere to park and sleep in my van.
What do you say to the kids? They understand? Because they know.
Yeah.
They know you're trying.
Again, not once during the entire documentary do they ask the mother, "Where's the dad?" Or I shudder to think, with 7 children, where are the dads, plural? Because that is the unfortunate pattern that leads to the very poverty that most bleeding heart progressives want to show the world they care about. However, it's as if they don't necessarily want to see the problem get solved. As if on a very, very subconscious level, certain progressives almost want there to be a class of people below them that they can feel sorry for, or at the very least, always have at their disposal for cheap labor. And the politicians progressives predictably vote for can always count on those same people for more votes by enticing them with free stuff that eventually runs out. Because it's real easy to be generous with other people's time and money. Yet that's the kind of pseudo-intellectual thinking we get from so many journalism graduates and glorified corporate lackey talking heads on what most people assume is the news. But in actuality, it's either a propaganda arm for the Democrat or Republican Party, depending on the corporate media company that are giving journalism and capitalism a bad name and encouraging more and more economically illiterate people to consider socialism and even communism as viable economic alternatives. And this is a large reason why many problems that could be easily solved, and better yet, avoided altogether in the first place, continue to fester like gangrenous open wounds. Thanks to so much misinformation and even disinformation passing for news and journalism by people you would think know better. But they're either as uninformed about the issues as the average person they're trying to inform, or they're deliberately disinforming them for their own ulterior motives, which those should also make it to the headlines. If I got anything wrong in this video, let me know in the comments below. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for upcoming videos, and check out the links below for my original art and merchandise. And thanks for watching.